Thank you for joining today's webinar on OSHA's improved reporting and record-keeping requirements. This webinar is partly offered by the University of South Florida 21D Consultation Program, the Tampa OSHA Area Office, the USF OSHA Training Institute Education Center, and the Sunshine ERC. This presentation is not a standard or regulation, creating no new legal obligations. It contains recommendations as well as descriptions of mandatory safety and health standards. The recommendations are advisory in nature, informational in content, and are intended to assist employers in providing a safe and healthful workplace. The Occupational Safety and Health Act requires employers to comply with safety and health standards and regulations promulgated by OSHA or a state with an OSHA-approved state plan. In addition, the Act's General Duty Clause, Section 5A1, requires employees to provide employers with a workplace free from recognized hazards likely to cause death or serious physical harm. This webinar will be 1.5 hours in length. We will reserve approximately 20 minutes to answer questions at the end of the webinar. You may experience some delays during the presentation as we transition between speakers. A few ground rules before we begin. You have been entered in listen-only mode. Please enter your questions as they arise into the chat or questions box. All questions will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation. If you experience technical difficulties during today's presentation, please get in touch with your department's IT help desk. A copy of today's PowerPoint and a brief survey will be sent to the email address you entered at the time of registration. My name is Thalia Barber. I am the Marketing and Communications Officer for the USF Safety Florida Consultation Program, and I will serve as your moderator this morning. Today's panel of experts consists of David Ashman. David Ashman is a safety and health consultant with the USF Safety Florida Consultation Program. He has over 15 years of safety and health experience, including working with city, county, and state fire and safety officials, as well as with building inspectors and disaster planning and communication authorities. Next is Olya Correa. Olya Correa has served 1 year in her current position as a compliance assistant specialist and 9 years as a compliance safety and health officer in industrial hygiene with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Before that, Ms. Correa was a military officer in the United States Army Chemical Corps, Special Operations for WMDE from 2003 to 2012. Some positions held include Future Operations Officer in Charge, Company Executive Officer, and Special Operations Team Leader. Olya holds an MBA. Without further ado, I now turn the webinar over to David Ashman.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm going to be going over a quick review of what the consultation program is and what it has to offer to small businesses, and hopefully to many of you that are listening. USF Safety Florida is the OSHA consultation program for the state of Florida. Every state or territory in which you have enforcement, you also have consultation. It's kind of like having two different departments in a way. And basically, it's there. We're here to offer help and assistance, compliance assistance with the standards for small businesses, which is usually $250 per establishment, 500 corporate wide. We're not out there helping the Walmarts and the Disneys of the world. We're helping people who may not have the financial capabilities to afford a private consultant. And our services are also free and confidential. Now, I want to elaborate on confidential. OSHA enforcement does not know at your facility. They do not see your report, and we cannot communicate with them in any way, shape, or form regarding your company. That's why in many cases we had to refer to the employer to contact enforcement to let us know if it's clear for us to go into their site. But also it works both ways. Enforcement can show up a week after our consultation, and they're supposed to contact their supervisor if we have an open case with you and give us the time to finish our case. Now, we assist employers on not just identifying problems. We also try to come up with solutions, provide resources. You know, if we see a hazard, we try to say, well, this is how I think it's happened. This is what you should do to correct it, and this is what you should do to prevent it from happening again. We also, like I said, we offer a lot of resources, and the benefits of using our program is you can avoid hazards. Hazards create injuries, which create work comp claims, which creates costs to the company. So indirectly, we help you avoid injuries, which we can do causes. Penalties. Also, if you work with our program and then OSHA shows up 6 months later or a year later, if you run through with what we've shown you, instead of having multiple penalties, you may have one or none. So that's a benefit. And again, reducing work comp costs because of reducing injuries and also maybe helping you establish a safety management program and a safety culture, which can definitely help you reduce your work comp costs and reduce injuries. And productivity. And I know you're probably thinking, well, how will that increase productivity? I work with many companies that have really good safety cultures. And when everyone's on the same page and everyone's following the safety management system, employees are happy, management's happy, and it really does help with productivity. Our team, we have safety people and we have health people. We have industrial hygienists that can do air sampling and noise sampling for you. We have a multitude of people from all kinds of background, military, private industry, engineering, you name it, we have it. And we can help you with your needs. We also can help you, again, as I mentioned, your safety management programs and your safety culture. We also have Safety Writer. Myself, I like to give a flash drive with data and information. We also have information, OSHA information on our website, but also we have Safety Writer. This was developed well before I started with the program. And basically, there's some standards that may apply to you that require specific written programs. Well, we have them for you. All you have to do is follow them. It's like IKEA. You're putting an IKEA desk together. These programs help you be in compliance with that standard. So, and we also have a DVD streaming system. So if you need help with hazard communication, you can download a hazard communication video, watch it, and help develop your own program or your own training program from those videos. So if you're interested in their program, you can always visit it at usfsafetyflorida.com and submit a request. And I know what you're thinking to yourself. Wow, that sounds really good. Sounds a little too good to be true. Well, let's get to the catch. The catch is if you work with us and we identify serious hazards at your facility or your location, you are required to correct them just as you would for enforcement. You're not going to tell enforcement no. So you have to correct them. But very importantly, there is no fee or cost for any of the visits that we conduct. There's no fees for the IHs doing sampling. Okay. And we're not going to communicate with enforcement unless you refuse to correct the serious hazards. But I'm assuming you want us there to help you identify them and correct them. So also, I want to discuss the OSHA Training Institute. They offer a lot of OSHA courses, OSHA courses that are important to you. They offer the 510, the 511, which is more for management, the 10 and 30, which is for workers and supervisors or field personnel. They offer a lot of numbered courses. We call numbered courses, which are things such as fall protection, hazmat, scaffolding. So if there's something specific or a certain group of people in your company or a manager that needs training on that specific subject in detail, they offer the courses for it. Here's where you can reach them at, usfotibc.org, and this is their phone number. So with that being said, we're going to move on. Before we move on to Olya's presentation regarding the new changes with OSHA record keeping, we're going to do a quick record keeping review. Excuse me. Now I know what you're thinking to yourself when you probably read this, right? Oh God, what's changing now? How is it changing? Are the requirements still the same? Are the forms changed? Are we completing everything the same? Is the data different? Let me set you at ease. No. Okay, no, these things, the standard itself has not changed. Only specific employers and some specific injuries, high hazard, with a certain number of employees per establishment have to report more data. And if you're on this call, that probably you're going to qualify for that. That's why it's important to listen to Olya's presentation in detail. And do I still need to submit my 300A? If you're doing it now, you're going to continue to do so. Unless, again, you fall into those qualifications, and Olya's going to go into more detail on that during her presentation. Who maintains the submit logs? Well, if you have 10 or more employees in your company, you have to maintain logs. Okay, there are some exemptions for that. If you're in certain industries, like low hazard industries, such as retail, doctor's offices, just some examples. And you can look up your industry code here, and then you go to the OSHA website, they have the exempted codes and see if you do or do not qualify for having to keep record keeping. And if you have over 20 employees per establishment, not company, but per establishment. So let me give you an example. You have 30 employees, you have 2 locations, and one has 22 employees. The record keeping from that, your 300-day only, has to be submitted to OSHA on an annual basis. Criteria. If you fall under those qualifications and you are an employer who has to, keep record keeping, you must record all your injuries, illnesses, fatalities, if it's work-related, if it's a new case, or if it meets the criteria of these standards, which we're going to try to cover in the following pages. OSHA record keeping force work comp. Many of the employers I work with, I'm dealing with the HR person, office manager, or someone who works or deals with work comp, but also record keeping. And a lot of times the work comp information is getting mixed in with the OSHA, and they are completely different. What's recorded, how it's recorded, and mostly why it's recorded. What qualifies as recordable is much different. Just because a claim is made doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a recordable case, which we're going to go into detail. Now, as far as recordability, OSHA has letters of interpretation on their website. Many of them, especially considered record keeping, there's very many of them. And we also refer to them as LOIs. If you go to OSHA's website, the OSHA.gov website, you're going to see a blue bar like this. Go to standards and standard interpretations. It's going to take you to this page, and for record keeping, you're going to go to 1904. But there's also letters of interpretation for construction and for general industry standards, which you can also access to here if you click on the standards tab. Once you're in 1904, you can see the multitude of different subject matters, and there can be a multitude of letters of interpretation within each one. I personally like to go directly to the standard. If you go to the standard and you can find which standard applies to your question, and the standard number is blue, which is a hyperlink, and you click on it, it will take you to those letters of interpretation that are specific to that standard. And I think that's probably a little bit better than trying to search through a whole list. Here's a letter of interpretation. I just grabbed a random letter to kind of give you an example. So the letter of interpretation is a letter that an employee or employer submitted to OSHA saying, I don't understand your standard. Does my situation here apply to the standard? Is this a violation? And OSHA responds in writing. And I'm not going to read this whole thing. No, trust me, I'm not going to read all this. I'm going to give you a quick overview. Basically, the employee said their employee drove home from work, commute, and they're at home. The employer called them and said, we have an emergency. You must come back to work right now. During which time the employee had an accident. And they're asking, is that recordable? And OSHA's response is, when the employee left to go home, it was a commute. But once they were contacted in the interest of the employer to return to work, it now became occupational. Therefore, that accident would be recordable. So again, this is only one example of many different letters of interpretation, probably for this specific standard and other standards within record keeping. I created this little scenario. I use this during my consultations for people who know nothing about record keeping, or just to basically give an overview of what is and is not recordable. And that's, I'm trying to catch as much as I can with this scenario, but it's not a catch all. An employee gets to work. They step out of their vehicle. They're on the property. They trip, fall, bang their nose. You send them to the doctor. Doctor looks at it and goes, yeah, I don't know. Let's take an x-ray just to make sure. Takes an x-ray, comes back and says, your nose is bruised. It's not broken. You're breathing fine. Nose isn't swollen. If you feel any pain tonight, take some over-the-counter pain medication, go back to work tomorrow. So would that be a recordable case? I'll tell you, I get the answer yes many times, because again, people are getting workers' comp confused with OSHA recordables. But when you look at this, this is a first case scenario, and therefore it would not be recordable. So why is it not recordable? Was the employee at work? Yes. If they're on a property that's owned or controlled by the employer, once they start out their vehicle, they're at work. Now, since this presentation came out, I had a situation with another employer. They were in a facility, complex with leased units with other employees, other employers, and the parking lot. And I brought this up to them. He said, well, I don't own this parking lot or control. I said, yes, but your employees come here to work. So yes, it would be the same scenario. Once they step out of their vehicle, they're at work. Now, if they park down the street at some shopping center and walked here and something happened, until they're on the property, they're not at work. Okay. What's the medical treatment provided? What is X-ray? X-ray is not medical treatment. Sutures, if the bone was broken, he set the bone. If there was a split, he did sutures. That's medical treatment. Did the doctor prescribe medication? The doctor said, no, take over-the-counter medication. Not recordable. Still first aid. And was there any lost time? No, there was not. You never count the day of the injury. You're always going to want to put what the doctor gives you in writing saying, I want this employee out for 1 day and on light duty for 3 days. And that's what you're going to record on your logs. And you're going to go by calendar days, not the days the employee work. It happens on Friday, they say 2 days light duty, you're putting 2 days light duty. Now let's go back again. The employee was at work. If any of these things changed, the employee was not at work, they were in their vehicle, or they did medical treatment, or they gave medication, or the employee said, the employer or doctor said lost time, automatically reportable. So what is first aid? You probably ask yourself. OSHA spelled it out in the standard. If you go to the standard 1904.7 B5 Roman numeral 2, you will see a list of what OSHA considers first aid. Now I'll give you an example here. Anything above and beyond what's on that list would be considered medical treatment or would be considered reportable. And there's one instance they say flushing eyes is first aid. So what if you remove something from an eye, remove a splinter, or send the doctor and have a piece of metal removed? Is that beyond flushing? Yes, it is. So it would be automatically recordable. Some other things that would be automatically recordable would be loss of consciousness. So if you have an employee, like I had one situation, they refused medical treatment, but they basically passed out. They didn't get hurt, but they lost consciousness. It would still be going on your log. And then you have cancer, which is caused by work environment, punctured eardrum, or fractured bone, or chip, or cracked bone or tooth. Here is your OSHA logs. You have the 300, 300A, and 301. We're going to just do a quick review here. If this thing will cooperate. This section here is kind of self-explanatory. Job location, if you're going to be doing any type of trend analysis, which I like to think of the 3 Ps, people, places, and processes. You're going to want to get detailed on where it happened within your facility. If you go out to job sites, which job site did it specifically happen at? Is there one person still showing up on there? Is there a process, cutting, lifting, that keeps getting repeated? That's the type, and again, repeated injuries. That's what you're looking for. This section here, many people put too much or too little. They're asking, it even tells you right here, 3 things: the injury, the specific body part, and how it occurred. So if you said fractured left thumb struck by hammer, 6 words, right? But it covers all 3 items. That's what you want to get at. Now, this gray box and this gray box, you're only allowed to select 1 item: fatality, day away, restriction, and other. If the employee is put on any type of day away, you select H. If it is only restriction and 0 days away, then you select I. You don't select both if these numbers are both filled in. But you still want to put both numbers in here. So if it's 1 and 3, you're going to put 1, 3, and mark this box. If it's 0 and 3, you're going to select this box. H or J is only for injuries. Say that scenario earlier, they gave them prescription medication, but he went back to work the next day. That would go under other. Column 1 here is injury, and these are illnesses. So again, depends on the situation. This document here starts January 1st to December 31st. So you're constantly going to be updating this. If something reoccurs in February the following year, like a reoccurring injury, you're going to go back and update this document. So, and then at the end of the year, when it closes out, you see here the same column numbers here. That data is going to be carried over to this. This is going to be filled out, and it's going to be signed by the highest executive officer available, preferably a president or CEO. And it needs to be posted for these 3 months down here, February 1st through April 30th. This is your 301. This is your accident investigation form, which you should be full out in completion. This can, so you may have to submit it, which we'll cover later. But if you have your own company-specific plan or investigation form that asks all of this information plus additional information such as photos, interviews, things of that nature, you can use your form as an equivalent and not have to fill out this form. Or if you have a work comp form, which most don't, but some may, or they can be modified to ask all these questions, you can also use as an equivalent. Additional information regarding that part of the recordkeeping. 0 injuries. Doesn't matter. Even if you have 0 injuries for 10 years, you still need to maintain those logs for the last 5. And you still have to submit them. Regardless of the 0 injuries, you're only going to be filling out the top portions. Right here in the top corner, you're going to be filling out that portion and this portion and just keep it as 0 injuries. Multiple business establishments. Olivia's going to cover this a little bit in her presentation. I'm just going to do a very quick one. If you have 100 employees and you have 5 businesses, you need 5 different logs. Okay, there are some exemptions. If you're on one property, you could probably group them under the headquarters. Okay, but if they're at a different establishment, or if you're doing, and that is if they're doing like the same process. But if you have one a block away and it's doing a completely different process and employees report there, you should have a separate log. If you have a warehouse that no one reports to down the street that you only use for loading and unloading, but someone could get injured there, then that can be covered under your headquarters. Covered employees. It's a long paragraph. Basically, if you're paying them or they're reporting to you, even a temporary employee, they're your responsibility. They need to be trained, they need to be taught, and they need to be on your record keeping if they get injured. The only example would be if a temporary service came to you to do a task and they sent their own team with their own leader, then there's an injury, it would go on the temporary company's log. But also there were some cases where people were double reporting. So if it goes in your log, make sure you communicate with the temporary service, let them know that you're not double reporting. And you're supposed to retain these logs for 5 years. We asked for 3, some officers asked for 3, but the rule is 5. And when they show up in your front door, you have 4 hours to provide those logs. And the reason I'm bringing that up, some companies work with this one person who controls all the record keeping on their computer that no one has access to. OSHA shows up on their own vacation, everyone's scrambling. So keep them on a server, keep a hard copy where people have access to them, so you're able to have them available at any time. I'm going to cover construction just a little bit here. If you have a temporary job site, which is less than a year, you're not required to keep record keeping. That will go on your headquarters logs. But if you have a 1-year temporary establishment, you are required to have the same logs, but it would be for only the employees of the general contractor. And I think there's some confusion there because I've seen some people putting their subcontractors' injuries on their logs because they have, say, a 3-year project. No, only the general contractor's employees go on that log. So some contractors are not included. It's just like if in general industry you have someone come fix your air conditioning and they fall off the roof. That's the air conditioning company. They're going to deal with that, not you. And temporary workers are a little different than subcontractors. In construction, most temporary workers are directly working for the general contractor, and they're usually day laborers most of the time. So their injuries do go on their temporary log if it's more, or their headquarters if it's less, but still goes on the company's logs, whichever it is. And that's how they differ from subcontractors. Now we're going to go over reportable versus recordable, which is completely different. There are specific injuries and illnesses that have to be reported directly to OSHA within certain timeframes. Fatality is 8 hours. Amputation, loss of an eye, or inpatient hospitalization is 24. The clock starts once a team member, supervisor, anyone in the company has knowledge of the injury, meeting those qualifications. If the injury is severe enough to be reportable, it's more than likely going to be recordable. This one is very tricky sometimes and confusing. If the injury qualifies as amputation, hospitalization, or loss of an eye, but it occurs after 24 hours of the actual incident, it does not need to be recorded. And this is a specific standard right there. You must only report the event if it occurs within 24 hours of the work-related incident. For example, an employee cuts their finger kind of deep. They get some sutures. It's a recordable injury. And a week later, it gets so infected, they go to the doctor, and the doctor removes the finger. Wow, that's an amputation. But it did not happen within 24 hours of the initial incident. Therefore, it does not need to report it to OSHA. Same incident, say the employee is the infection and they get admitted to the hospital. Same situation. It is not reportable to OSHA because it did not happen within 24 hours. Now, this does not apply to fatalities. All fatalities have to be reported once you have knowledge within 24 hours. If it happens now, or happened 2 months later from the same injury. Does not matter. So what is inpatient hospitalization? What is amputation? Well, OSHA gave you the definitions right there. Inpatient hospitalization is admitted to a room, basically. However, it is not reportable to OSHA if they're only kept overnight for observation and no actual treatment is given to the employee. So the injury still may be serious enough to be recordable, but if they only do observation, it may not be reportable to OSHA. And also amputation, basically if it's a fingertip has been removed or a piece of flesh or bone has come off, even if it's sewn back on or reattached partially or fully, or even if the doctor removes it, it's an amputation. And once you have knowledge of it, it needs to be reported. But for some reason, degloving, scalpings, ears, and broken or chipped teeth, it does not qualify. So how do I report these injuries if what I have falls within those qualifications? You can contact your local office. You Google it on your phone. You have them 4 different locations in Florida, Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, Fort Lauderdale. Any of them can take your report. You can call a 1-800, 24-hour 1-800 line. And also they have a website where you actually can submit your information online. What if I'm unsure if it's reportable or recordable? Well, you can call any of those area offices and ask for the duty officer during these time frames, and they should be available to answer your questions. And if you have any doubts about anything we discussed today or anything that OSHA covers, and you think you need more assistance, you can contact us at consultation and we can talk to you, or maybe set up a consultation. Maybe we should come in and do some record keeping training with you. And while we're there, we can help you with other safety issues. But also you can contact the OTI because they do offer OSHA record keeping courses. Here's a few links I included here. This one here is the OSHA website that has 2 different presentations about what I just discussed today, but maybe in more detail. You have a limited one and a more detailed one that's all about record keeping, which can be very useful. This is OSHA's main record keeping page. And this is everything we just discussed about reporting injuries. It's their main page that discusses reporting injuries. So with that being said, I'm going to pass the helm to Olya, and thank you very much for listening. Have a good day.
Thank you, David. What a wonderful presentation. Great job, very detailed. I love the resources and information you provided. Hello, everyone. My name is Olya Korea, and I'm the Compliance Assistance Specialist out of the OSHA Tampa area office. Thank you to USF for having me here today. And today I will be discussing the final rule to improve tracking of workplace injuries and illnesses with you. So the main purpose of the rule is to prevent workers' injuries and illnesses through the collection and use of timely establishment and case-specific injuries and illness data. The information obtained through this rule, OSHA employers, employees, employees' representatives, states and local agencies, consultants, and researchers will be able to better identify and mitigate workplace hazards and thereby prevent work injuries and illnesses. The final rule will support OSHA's statutory directive to assure safe and healthful working conditions for working people by providing for appropriate reporting procedure regarding occupational safety and health that will help achieve the objective of the OSHA Act. So the final rule to amend record-keeping requirements, so on July 21st, 2023, OSHA published the final rule to amend record-keeping occupational injuries and regulation, and it will be going into effect on January 1st, 2024. The final rule, of course, will be supporting the mission to assure safe and healthful work conditions for working people, of course. And here is the final rule to improve tracking. So certain establishments must electronically submit to OSHA detailed information about each recordable injury and illness entered on their previous calendar year. So the OSHA 300 log and the 301 incidents reporting form. This includes the date, physical location, and severity of the injury or illness, details about the worker who was injured, and details about how the injury occurred accordingly. And the OSHA will be protecting the identity of the employee, and we will discuss this further down. So establishment with 100 or more employees in certain designated industries listed in the new Appendix B to Subpart E will be newly required to electronically submit information from their OSHA Form 300 and 301 to OSHA once a year. The industries listed in the new Appendix B were chosen based on 3 measures of industry hazardness. And then we have the establishment with 20 to 249 employees in certain designated industries, which are listed in the Appendix A to Subpart E, will continue to be required to electronically submit information from their Form 300 annual summary to OSHA once a year. And I will be providing you links to each one of those appendixes so you can check if it might be applying to you. Establishment with 250 or more employees in the industries that are required to routinely keep OSHA injury and illness records will continue to be required to electronically submit information from Form 300 to A to OSHA once a year. So no change. And of course, establishments are required to use their legal company name for submission, which that helps OSHA, see who it actually is and kind of keep basically their ducks in a row when it comes to, who is what, which one is which company. So this is the final rule to improve tracking. And remember how I was talking to you about Appendix B to Subpart E? This is the link to it, so you can see if your NAICS code is on it, as well as the Appendix A to Subpart E. I have that listed below for you as well. And that one is the one with no change. So if you've been doing it, you probably are still on the list accordingly. And this is injuries tracking application, ITA. So establishment under the federal OSHA jurisdiction can use the ITA coverage application to determine if they are required to electronically report their injuries and illness information to OSHA. And this is a great, great tool, because if you are unsure, you can put in your data and see if you are actually supposed to be submitting it. So you might be like, oh, Alia, you know, I don't know about all these appendixes and looking for my NAICS, you know, and seeing, you know, if it's there, I'm not sure. You can just go to the ITA coverage application to determine if you are. And then establishment under the state plan jurisdiction should directly contact the state plan. But here in Florida, we are federal OSHA, and we are not a state plan. So this is the check if your business is required for to report. This is what I was talking to you about. And this is the data that you would be entering. It only takes a minute to determine if you are or if you are not. And see, it has only how many? 5 questions for you to answer to determine it. So it takes only a minute to check if you are part of this new ruling. So 3 options on how to submit data. So you might be asking yourself, do I need specific software to electronically submit data to OSHA? No, you don't. OSHA has provided a secure website for electronic submission of this information. The website includes web forms for direct data entry and instructions for you as well on how to do it. This is a very, very great link on how to be able to do it. And the 3 different choices that you have are through the web form on ITA, which I discussed with you already, and then submission of CSV files to the ITA. And then third option is use of an applicable program interference feed for the ITA. So those are your 3 options that you have. So the ITA will begin accepting 2023 injuries and illnesses data on January 2nd, 2024. The due date to complete, as it is every year, it is March 2nd, 2024, and submission is required to be done annually. And the deadline for timely submission of the previous year injuries would be March 2nd of each year, of course. Yep. And then protection of workers' privacy. So this is some information how OSHA is tackling on protecting the workers' privacy. So first of all, OSHA will not collect workers' name and address. OSHA will convert birth dates to age and discard birth dates themselves. OSHA will remind employers not to submit information that could directly identify workers, such as name, addresses, telephone numbers, etc. OSHA will withhold from publication the information on age, gender, date of hire, and whatever the worker was treated in the emergency room or the hospital overnight as an inpatient. And OSHA will use automated information technology to detect and remove any remaining information that could directly identify the employee and the worker. And then some benefits of the final rule. It's of course to improve the ability to use its enforcement and compliance assistance resources by enabling OSHA to identify the workplaces where workers are at high risk. This is very, very important because OSHA is a very small agency. And then increase OSHA's effectiveness and efficiency by providing establishment specific case-specific injuries and illness data for analysis that are not currently possible, increase OSHA's ability to identify and respond to emerging hazards, and of course, improve the ability of employers, employees representatives, and researchers to identify and mitigate workplace hazards and thereby prevent worker injury and illness. And here is to learn more. Here is some additional links. As David was already discussing with you about the record keeping, he provided so many amazing resources, but this is some additional information that you can go to learn more. And some more resources. So the improved tracking of workplace injuries and illness fact sheet, that is basically based on this new change. And it's a one-page fact sheet that has all the information for you on one sheet. So it's a great link to click on and just have a side for yourself. And then we have here the link for help for employers through our OSHA.gov webpage, as well as the registration. Remember how I told you, you can just check if you are, if you fall into this category, well, this is the link for it. And then we have some frequently asked questions that I want to go over with you. So how do I create an ITA account? The steps to create an ITA account and connect it to a login.gov account are explained in the Create an ITA account and Create a login.gov account Job 8. You can watch on how to do it video, which is here hyperlinked for you to do as well, which covers the account creation process. This is a very great link because, sometimes, when people explain to you step by step, but you don't see it physically, one can miss steps and then you are like, oh, I'm stuck. Well, with this how-to video, you actually get to see where they are clicking and how they are doing it. It's a great layman's term kind of easy access for our employers out there. And if I was you, I would most definitely take advantage of it. So continuing on, I submitted my Form 300A data before the due date, but I have subsequently learned of a new recordable case that occurred last year. Do I need to edit and resubmit my information? So you are not required to submit updated information after your original submission, but you may do so if you wish. Note that you are required to update your OSHA Form 300 to reflect the new information. And then here is the information on how to edit the data following these steps. So you would log into the ITA and choose View Establishments list. Then click on the establishment link of the facility you want to edit. Click on the 300A summary, make your change and save them. So the keyword is always save them and then resubmit the data. And that is if you wish to update it in the system. But on site, you of course have to maintain your 300 logs to the most accurate version accordingly. So does OSHA notify employers that they need to report their Form 300A? And if not, where do I get my username and password to log in and provide my data? So OSHA does not send out notification to report the Form 300A. If your establishment meets the industry and size reporting criteria, you must create an account in the injury tracking application, ITA, remember the stuff I showed you earlier in the presentation, and connect the IT account to login.gov account with the same email address. Once you create your account, you can log in and report your Form 300A data on an annual basis. Each year, the data you are due is due by March 2nd, of course, as we discussed. To create an IT account, go to the injury tracking application login page and select create an IT account link. And that is right below the injury tracking application banner. Follow the instruction from there on and register accordingly. If you are part of this group that has to electronically submit your data. So I missed the March 2nd deadline for submitting my Form 300A. Can I still submit the data? Yes. The ITA will accept your Form 300A data through the end of the calendar year. So to get it done before December 31st, you must electronically submit the data if you are required to do so. So this is not a leeway time, but you are still able to submit it before December 31st, that following year. So that would be then December 31st, 2024. Are the electronic reporting requirements based on the size of the establishment or the size of the firm? The electronic reporting requirements are based on the size of the establishment, not the firm, meaning the corporation. The OSHA injury and illness records are maintained at the establishment level. An establishment is defined as a single physical location where business is conducted or where services or industrial operations are performed. We are going to discuss this numerous times during this presentation. A firm or a corporation may be comprised of one or more establishments. To determine if you need to provide OSHA with the required data for the establishment, you need to determine if the establishment peak employment during the last calendar year. And each individual employed in the establishment at the time during the calendar year counts as one employee, including full-time, part-time, seasonal, and temporary workers. I've been dealing a lot with, most recently with seasonal workers, so we look at the peak for that year. So we will be looking for the peak of 2023. My firm has multiple establishments that do different things, which determine where I have to submit data for these establishments. The industry classification of the firm or the industry classification of the establishment. So the electronic reporting requirements are based on the industry classification of the establishment, as we are going establishment based, not the industry classification of the firm. An establishment is defined, as I told you, we are going to be repeating this. So an establishment is defined as a single physical location where business is conducted or where services and industrial operations are performed. A firm may be comprised of one or more establishments. So this is a big one to take away with you. So my company operates multiple facilities on campus setting. Each facility has less than 250 employees, but the campus has more than 250 employees. How should I count my employees to determine if I have to electronically provide OSHA with my injury and illness records? So the recording and reporting requirements of Part 1904 are establishment-based, as we discussed. Under most circumstances, a campus is a single physical location and considered as a single establishment. Under limited conditions, you may consider 2 or more separate facilities that share a single location to be separate establishments. You may divide one location into 2 or more establishments only when each facility represents a distinctly separate business. 2. Each facility is engaged in a different economic activity. 3. No one industry description applies to the joint activity of the establishment. And 4. Separate reports are routinely prepared for each establishment concerning each establishment number of employees, wages, and salary rates, sales or receipts, and other business information. So I am submitting the required data for multiple establishments. All of my establishments have the same name, but the system will not allow me to use a name more than once. What can I do? So each establishment name must be unique. But remember how I told you OSHA wants you to have your legal name accordingly. So you can make each unique by adding a number or a city name to the end of the establishment name. And the keyword is to the end of it, okay? For example, if your establishment name is XYZ, you can make it each location unique in the following manner. You would put the establishment name XYZ-1, XYZ-2, and so on, or the city. Just, depends on your preference and what makes the most sense for your business. May my firm with multiple establishments make a single submission of the data from the multiple establishments. So a firm with more than one establishment must submit establishment-specific 300A data for each establishment that meets the size and industry reporting criteria. These data may be submitted using one ITA account. It is important to note that the electronic reporting requirements are for data at the establishment level, not the firm's level. An establishment is defined, of course, as a single physical location where business is conducted or where services or industrial operations are performed. A firm may be comprised of one or more establishments. The submitted data must be specific for each individual establishment. So may a third party submit data for an establishment or firm? Yes. As a third party is allowed to maintain the injury and illness records for an employer. A third party is allowed to submit the data for that employer. However, and this is a big however, as with record keeping, responsibility for completeness and accuracy of the data lies within the employer, not the third party. So make sure if you are getting a third party that they know what they are doing and that they are capturing the information accurately. I want multiple staff members to access the information in my account. How do I give them access? I do believe that this one is a really, really big one, and it's an important one to have multiple people that one can trust accordingly with such matters, be able to have access to it just in case one person leaves your establishment or leaves or is out on leave. You have somebody who is secondary that is able to log in and take care of things. And this is the steps for want to enroll multiple people accordingly. A company is located with multiple buildings with one complex. Can I produce one log for the complex, or do I need to have one log for each building? You may complete one log for complex. Generally, there should be one log per establishment. An establishment, of course, is defined as a single physical location and can include campus and complex type locations. So leading on to our next question, a supervisor was shouting at an employee. The employee felt stressed, and his general doctor told him to take some time off from work. Is this an OSHA 300 recordable case? Mental illness such as depression or anxiety disorders that have work-related stress as a contributing factor are recordable if the employee voluntarily provides the employer with an opinion from a physician or other licensed healthcare professional with appropriate training and experience, psychiatrist, psychologist, psychiatric nurse practitioner, etc., stating that the employee has mental illness that is work-related and the case meets one or more of the general recording criteria. Okay, so this is it. Thank you so much for your time. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Olya and David, for your informative and dynamic presentation. We will now field the questions, so please be sure to enter your questions in the chat box as they arise. Our first question is for David. You mentioned cancer recordability. Is this for cancer caused by the work environment?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, if it can prove it, if you get something from the doctor that specifically says their cancer was the cause of the environment or items that they're working with in their work environment, it would be recordable.
Our next question is from Melissa. If days away and restrictions are both present, which is reported on the 300 log?
Both are recorded and the columns say day away and restriction, but which box you check mark depends on if you have only restriction, that would be the third column. If there's any day away, it would be the second column.
Thank you, David. Are volunteers considered should their incidents be recorded?
Volunteers are not employees. They're not being paid, and they would not be covered by your, I'm assuming your workers' comp, and they definitely would not go in your recordables.
How long do I need to keep training logs for?
That's a slippery slope right there and a very tricky question. It depends on the standard and depends on the specific training. A lot of training requires initial training, but doesn't really specify if it has to be even documented or if it has to do retraining. But here's what you have to think about. If you give someone hazard communication training now, 2 years have passed, are they going to remember that training if they're not actively dealing with chemicals? And if you're inspected by enforcement, they're going to interview employees. So we always recommend annual retraining, at least annually. But as far as retention, we don't really get too far into that. But some specific standards like forklifts require retraining every 3 years. So you'd have to keep the previous training at least 3 years until you do new retraining. So I'm sorry it's a broad question, but it's just there's too many variables involved to answer that. Whoever asked that question probably should reach out to consultation.
Does the 5-year retention also include training and forklift logs?
No, as I mentioned before, forklift is every 3 year, and what I said about the training logs is, again, specific to the standard.
Robin asks, if a construction project is in another state and lasts longer than 1 year, do we have to have a separate OSHA log?
Yes.
If an employee, while performing normal work, lost consciousness and went to a medical provider, and the provider stated that it was a personal related issue, is this still recordable?
No. If the doctor determines it's a pre-existing condition or a condition the employee brought to work, I've run in this case many times. No, it has to be a loss of consciousness due to, say, heat stress or electrical contact or something in the work environment.
If an establishment has not reported 2022 or previous years, can and should they go in and record now?
Oh yeah.
So, Talia, as the system was saying, they have like, if they didn't report like the last year, they have till December 31st. So then they are able to get, I guess, go back 1 year. But would I do it? Yes. If I missed the deadline, yes, I would still go ahead and submit the data accordingly.
Our next question is from Rustin. Under the new rule, is Form 301 required for submittal, or is a 301 equivalent acceptable?
An equivalent would be acceptable. You just have to make sure that it coincides with the OSHA form. Making sure of that, because many people, oh, this is an equivalent, and then it's missing data, that would not be acceptable. But if if the employer is stating it's equal and it has all the same data, then that would be fine.
Thank you, Olya. Our next question is from Antonio. It was mentioned if the employee was not considered an inpatient after 24 hours from DOI, it is not required to be reported to OSHA, nor is it considered a recordable incident. Therefore, if an employee is not considered an inpatient, if they were only kept for testing and observation, would it be recordable and or reported to OSHA if the patient did receive treatment or care?
Yes. But the question is a little confusing there. Yet, recordable and reportable are different. Say an employee has an incident and they go into the hospital, they only perform first aid, they keep them overnight for observation, and no treatment is provided, no medications given. It's not reportable or recordable. But the employee can get an injury severe enough that it's recordable on your OSHA logs, but they're kept overnight and only for observation. Say a loss of consciousness would be automatically recordable, and they're kept for observation and released. Would not be reportable to OSHA, but still would go on your OSHA log. All you do concur?
I do, David.
Okay.
So,
okay.
As long as the person wasn't admitted and they are, not doing this stuff to them, then it wouldn't be reportable or recordable accordingly. But if there is more than first aid, then it would be reportable, but not, it would be, so if there is more than first aid, it would be recordable, but not reportable. And then if the employee does get them admitted at the hospital, then it would be reportable to the local OSHA office as well.
Our next question is from Melissa. We have a corporate office with over 100 admin employees, but we have 24 locations that our residential plumbers, HVAC techs run out to service clients in a geographical area. Some of those locations have less than 10 employees. Are those locations still considered establishments?
Yes.
Correct.
Our next question from Danielle. Are there consequences for late reporting?
Yes, so there are consequences for late reporting to the local OSHA office. There is actually a standard that one is in violation of, and if one doesn't report to OSHA accordingly.
And along similar lines, what would happen if you fail to report a reportable injury?
So if the employer fails to report injury, if there is an inspection and they find out about it accordingly, there would be a violation.
And this next question is for David. Is the consultation a one-day thing, or do they need to work with you until everything is correct?
Most of the time, our consultations are one-day events, but you have to understand this program is kind of for you. So it can be used in different manners. We can do limited visits where a walkthrough of the facility is not conducted. We can do a limited and then a follow-up visit. We can do training and assistance visits. But normally we do one initial visit per year. But again, depending on the situation, the scenario, maybe you don't have a job site available, maybe you just don't want us to go into your production area, there are other options.
Thank you, David. Next question is for Olya. Can you touch on the existence of third-party support for organizations that may want ongoing compliance or safety support, or perhaps do not have internal staff knowledge or technical expertise to perform those types of support services?
Yeah, so, third party, we can consider, for example, USF consultation to be a third party that one would get in there and, get the training that they might not need or the assistance accordingly for a more helpful and safe work environment. It's, ensuring whoever you're going to have there that they know what they are doing, because ultimately we go back to the employer if they don't. So ensuring that whoever one is getting, they know they are the subject matter experts accordingly. It's very important.
I want to interject here, Thaya. If you use consultation, we'll tell you during our consultations, we're here to help point out issues that are wrong, but we're here to train you as employers on how to be compliant with say a standard that requires training. So you may need to have someone on staff that's going to conduct that training, or hire a third-party private consultant that can help you establish your programs and do your written programs and do your specific training, or do training out. But remember, training is going to be site and company specific. When you have hazard communication, for example, and you have specific chemicals that needs training, you're not going to get that from a video or a generic training process. It's something that you're going to have to take care of in-house.
Yeah, that's some great points, David.
Thank you, Ollie.
And our very last question that just came in is from Carl. Can an employee decline a private interview with a co-show?
They can decline a private interview with a co-show, but let's say that it is something that we need. Like, let's say like if I have, for example, 10 of the same employees working that same job, OSHA is ultimately there for their protection. And let's say that there might be an employee that witnessed the accident or that was part of the accident. OSHA is able to subpoena them to their office and interview them accordingly in order to find out the further details, if that is their one source accordingly to be able to speak to. But, OSHA is not there to traumatize employees. OSHA is here for the protection of the employees. So just depending on the scenario.
And Ollie, I have a question on if it's determined that person refused due to the instructions from their employer, what would happen?
Oh, that is a great question. They are protected under the whistleblower, and then that employer is trying to obviously interfere with an OSHA inspection. So we would go that route as well as any employee that is interviewed by OSHA and selected to be interviewed is protected under the OSHA Act, Section 11C, which states they can't be retaliated against in any way. Otherwise, we would do this whole whistleblower investigation and pursue that accordingly.
Thank you, Ollie.
Thank you. Great question, David.
We thank our presenters and attendees for participating in today's webinar on OSHA's improved reporting and record-keeping requirements. As a reminder, you will receive a copy of today's presentation, the recording, and a brief survey via email. Thank you.